What's going on, party people? This is Chuck, aka Basiclandshark from over on twitch.tv. We're going to take a few moments to go over my Jund sideboard so that you know what cards we're running currently to stack up well versus Modern's metagame on Magic Online specifically, because most places you still can't play Paper Modern right now, so it all takes place on Magic Online. With that said, the most popular decks in the metagame right now, it is May the 22nd of 2021. They are Blue-Red Blitz, Eldrazi Tron, Heliod Company, Bring to Light Scapeshift, Amulet Titan, Esper Control, Dredge, and Panza. Those are, I think, the decks to beat. So how are we taking those into account when we sideboard with Jund? Currently, we're running Ghost Quarter, which is really good with a copy of Wrenn and 6 in the deck. A single Ghost Quarter you can rebuy with Wrenn and 6 and blow up lots of Tron lands and Valakuts, so that's kind of a nod to the big mana matchups in the format. Nile Spellbomb, you need at least 3 of these in order to deal with Modern's graveyard decks. Lurrus of the Dream Den is enough of a problem by itself to warrant having this card in the decks or in the sideboard, but also decks like Dredge and Storm will just eat you alive if you don't have any graveyard hate. Weather the Storm, we would bring this in versus actual Storm, but this is more or less for the burn matchups and to hedge against Blue-Red Blitz being the most powerful deck in the format by far. So this card has a lot of applications outside of just players storming off. You usually gain about 9 life on average with this card, and that can be enough to swing the Blue-Red Blitz match in your favor with Jund. Unravel the Aether, this is a nod for Green-White Company or Heliod combo, whatever we're calling the deck. Choose target artifact or enchantment. Its owner shuffles it into their library, so you can shuffle in Heliod with this card. Even though the card is indestructible, it works as a removal spell. It also has applications versus Amulet Titan, because you can take out their Amulet of Vigor, and I'd also bring this card in against Tron, so it's very versatile and hates on a few matchups at once, which is kind of where you want your sideboard cards to be, in my opinion. Cleansing Wildfire, sticking with our hate for big mana. This takes out Tron lands, and this takes out Valakut mainly. There's a few other targets that would be good for it, but Cleansing Wildfire can also fix our mana against a Blood Moon deck like Panza, so I do tend to sideboard in 1 or 2 of these in a Blood Moon matchup as well. Collective Brutality, you need ways to gain life. This is probably our best card, sans Weather the Storm versus the Blue-Red Blitz or Prowess decks. This is also a House versus Burn. Boros Burn, ever popular in the Magic Online modern leagues, so it can also take out counterspells from a control player's hand. Collective Brutality really does a lot for a little, and that's why we run this card even still in as 2 copies. Kind of a mainstay of Jund sideboards since the card was printed. Ashiok Dreamrender, this card shores up a lot of Jund's bad matchups in my opinion, which are the big mana matchups like Amulet Titan and Tron. Doesn't let them search their library for key permanents like Tron lands or Valakuts with Primeval Titan. It also is going to augment our graveyard hate plan of Nile Spellbomb, so we'll bring this card in against Dredge, sometimes versus Death Shadow decks that do operate with a lot of fetch lands in order to reduce their life total, because they can't fetch, they can't have a graveyard. This card just says no to all that. Not to mention, this also has a lot of upside with Crocs, Titan of Deathshunger, which is in the main deck here. We can use Ashiok to mill ourselves, look for more cards for escaping Crocs, and that has enough upside to run this card sometimes, even when it's not the greatest. Plague Engineer, this card is just basically for tribal decks, so your merfolk, your goblins, your elves, your humans. This is going to be what we want to bring in versus any tribal deck in the format. And yes, you can name certain cards with it and take out certain cards with it like Narcomoeba, but it's more or less for those tribal decks. It does also come in the attrition matchups like Death Shadow, because they can be a little bit threat light. Sometimes just being able to trade with a permanent. Also Wormcoil Engine. I like to trade with Wormcoil Engine when I can versus Tron, so I bring it in there. It's better than something like maybe a Lightning Bolt. Plague Engineer has enough reasons to bring it in outside of just tribal that we do bring it in from time to time. Boyle, this is our card du jour for the blue decks in the format, the Cryptic Command decks, if you will. Esper Control, sort of on the rise currently, and has been performing pretty well, so we need an answer to the Cryptic Command decks. Boyle's the best one, but it also comes in versus decks that run Dryad of the Illusion Grove, aka Amulet Titan. So we can blow opposing Amulet player out of the water by blowing up all their lands, because Dryad of the Illusion Grove makes all their lands islands in addition to their other types. So now you know what's in our sideboard. Let's talk about a few spicy cards in the main deck. Bone Crusher Giant, right now making its way into Jund. Ariok Champion is a 4 of in the green-white company deck or Heliod deck, so we don't want to be completely boned by that card. Haha, see what I did there? So we run a singleton copy of Bone Crusher Giant for the stomp effect that can't be prevented by the protection from red. It's good to have an answer to that card in the main deck somewhere, but it's also a very good beater as a 4/3. You can cascade into that with Bloodbraid Elf, or even cascade into the stomp ability if you want. Pretty sweet card to have access to. The third copy of Fatal Push over the fourth copy of Lightning Bolt. Right now, Fatal Push is better than Lightning Bolt in the format because it actually handles the creatures in Blitz. Lightning Bolt kind of does not. And I think there's also enough big mana matchups in the form of Tron, Amulet, that Fatal Push is just better. It takes out Dryad of the Illusion Grove, which is very important. Bolt does not. The 2 copies of Crocs, this is pretty much standard. Some decks run 1 and cards like Dark Confidant, but I don't like Dark Confidant right now. I think you just take too much damage off of it, especially with things like Thoughtseize in the deck. Ren 6 kind of kicked out Dark Confidant, so you don't really need that card right now. Croxa is kind of a late game card. It can come back from the graveyard and escape in the late game, kind of take over the game. It can actually trade with a Primeval Titan, which is huge in that matchup. So I like Croxa a lot for the deck. The Seasoned Pyromancers, these are kind of in and out of Jund recently. Some decks are cutting this for additional copies of Bone Crusher Giant, and that could be very feasible. If you really want to run more Bone Crusher Giants, have at it. The Maelstrom Pulse, this is a card I could take or leave, but it does get you out of a lot of situations that no other card would. Hits Planeswalkers, which is very important, but it also can sweep the board if your opponent is just gone for Empty the Warrens or something like that, or they happen to have a lot of the same creature lying on the battlefield. The 2 copies of Assassin's Trophy, some people dislike Assassin's Trophy because it gives the opponents lands. But the ability to hit Tron lands and Planeswalkers makes this card pretty much the de facto removal spell for Jund, in my opinion. I wouldn't really run Terminate or Dreadbore in that spot, or Abrupt Decay, but Assassin's Trophy is just versatile enough to always get the nod in that spot. So we've tried other removal spells, and to me they just don't seem as good as Assassin's Trophy, so that's why I'm running Assassin's Trophy right now. We do have 4 copies of Bloodbraid Elf with the control decks in the metagame, like Esper Control. 4 seems like the correct number. 23 lands, only 1 copy of Nurturing Peatland and only 1 copy of Raging Ravine. I think 23 lands is fine right now with Ren 6. If we didn't have Ren 6 to help hit our land drops, then I can see running 24 lands, but with Ren 6, I think 23 is just fine. And with that, I think that's enough of an overview of the deck. Hopefully this was helpful in some way. If you liked it, be sure to hit the like button. If you disliked it, be sure to hit the dislike button and drop a comment to let me know what we can do to improve. For now, this is going to be Chuck from twitch.tv, Basiclandshark. So check me out, twitch.tv/Basiclandshark for a live stream. I tend to stream on the weekends now, either Saturday or Sunday, with some sporadic streams on weeknights. So check me out over there, and until then, have a great day. Thanks, YouTube.